And welcome back to In the Can. We've got a full day here. It's the first full day of the festival, as everybody knows, and we're trying to talk about as many of these films as we possibly can from the get-go, so you have a good chance to go out and see them. We are talking about one film that is really interesting to me personally because I've been a fan for a long time. It's called Gleason. We've got Seth Gordon and Clay Tweel here, director, producer, still trying to get his mic on. That's the way we're rolling today. And Gleason revolves around Steve Gleason. And just to give a little background, Steve Gleason, former defensive back for the New Orleans Saints in the NFL. And a lot of people know his story, but I kind of want to hear his story from your perspective. So why don't you set this up?
Sure. So back in 2006, Steve blocked a punt that kind of ignited a city and sparked this this win over the Atlanta Falcons. And
it was the first game back after Hurricane Katrina.
Right.
So it was this moment at the Superdome, which housed so many people during.
Right. And weeks before, literally was falling apart.
Yeah.
Yes.
And now they're holding an NFL game, and the country was watching. Because, of course, all of our hearts turned to New Orleans in that area during that time. So we kind of adopted the Saints a little bit for a minute, didn't we?
Absolutely.
And that first game back, I think it was Monday Night Football.
Yeah.
Everyone was watching, and Steve blocked this punt because everyone sort of wanted the Saints to win on that night in a way.
Right.
And he had this amazing moment that became a statue in front of the Superdome.
And just to give people some perspective about what Steve does, he's not a superstar. He's not a household name. At least he wasn't when he played, right? He wasn't one of those, $10 million players. He was a special teams guy, but he was that one guy on the team that everybody loves because he plays harder than anybody else. And we were talking before we came on, Steve, not a lot of people gave Steve a chance even to play in the league.
Sure.
He's one of those undersized guys, but he had a big heart and a lot of will and, of course, energy to surpass anybody's.
Yeah, I mean, his perseverance and determination are what kind of kept him in the league, got him in the league. And also, he's like amazingly fast.
Right.
So those two things, and just his kind of sheer will to overcome the obstacles of being, undersized and not the biggest guy, but he really was able to excel and make a name for himself. And like I told you, I think his teammate, I loved it, called him. His nickname was the Specialist.
Right.
I just love that. Like, he was known on the team as the guy that could, do those the little things that needed to be done to win.
They'd have him break the wedge on special teams,
Right.
which is sort of a kamikaze position. You put someone there who will do anything to win, and he did.
Yeah.
And that one play sort of memorialized and cemented him as a hero for New Orleans.
Now, before we make people think that this is a documentary about football,
Right?
that's kind of the setup, but that's not really the
It's like
story.
the
The story
first
is a
5
lot
minutes,
deeper.
maybe.
Yeah.
Right. So tell us what happened and what Steve found out.
Sure. So right around the same time, Steve had retired from football about 3 years, and he was having some health issues. And right around the same time that he finds out his wife is pregnant, he is diagnosed officially with ALS. And so that's where our movie really kind of comes in and picks up, where it's this journey of this guy kind of trying to overcome the challenges of this disease and how it's making him confront, how to be the best father and husband possible when faced with these limitations.
I can't imagine. I mean, you find out, and again, this is a debilitating disease. It literally ruins the body, and he was only given a few years to live at the initial onset, right?
Yeah.
But then you find out that you're going to have a son right around the same week or two that you find out that you have this disease.
And one of the things from an ALS diagnosis is you're very likely to, at some point, lose your voice, no longer be able to speak. And thinking way ahead, he started filming letters to his son. I don't think he actually knew he was a son yet,
Right.
but to his child, and telling stories and relaying pieces of wisdom. Here's how you skip a rock. Here's how you build a fire. But also being very honest about what was happening with him, falling apart as an NFL player. He started this physical specimen, and now his body's failing him, and he was very honest about how frustrating that was. And those are just as important as fatherhood lessons as the skipping of the rock and the building a fire.
What's also really powerful is just the kind of prophetic nature of the things that Steve would talk about early on in his kind of diagnosis and disease, that then he can he could almost like see ahead into the future of what was going to be down the road for him. And just that intelligence to be able to do that and think that far ahead is really quite extraordinary to watch unfold throughout the course of the movie. And like one of the little things that I love is, you know, he like when he still had a voice, he would read these children's books to the camera so that when he could no longer speak later, he can still read a book to his son.
He pretty much showed that same tenacity in real life as he did on the field. And I can't imagine, you know, again, this is a disease where you don't come back from it. But then knowing that you have a son, I mean, I'm curious as to how that story unfolded as you guys were there watching it. Do you think that young man in his life actually gave him a purpose, or I mean, did he need purpose, or, you know, to talk about that relationship a little bit?
Yeah, very much so. I think Steve found a lot of renewable energy and purpose in trying to be there as long as possible to be with his son. There's no spoiler here. I mean, he's still with us, Steve is, and the disease has progressed dramatically, and now it's pretty much he can move his eyes and parts of his face, and that's about it. But he can write. This is a really important part of the movie, actually. He created a foundation to help push the technology forward, and he worked with a number of companies, including Microsoft, and there's a tablet that can read his eye movements, and he can type with his eyes, and so he can communicate that way, and that's you know, amazing.
On top of that, he banked his voice so that the computerized voice that he has now is actually a version of his own voice when he could still talk. And so, yeah, the kind of like, I don't know, Steve has just always been obsessed with technology, and he's become this beta tester for all of these different technologies. And he's like, Microsoft has told us, one of the fastest typers in the world with his eyes. For that technology. So,
well, I know that we've got a clip. I'd love to kind of show that and kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about after. Let's take a look at it right now. Here is a piece of Gleason. Can't imagine just watching that. And of course, that's earlier on, probably, you know, obviously right when they found out they were pregnant, and that's before Steve's situation kind of deteriorated. But talk a little bit about Steve's wife, because, you know, that's another story in and of itself. To know that you're going to have a child with the man you love, and that man you love may be leaving soon in many different ways.
Yeah, Michelle is amazing, and one of the kind of surprises of the movie was actually being able to track her story and really see the evolution of what diseases like this do to the people that are the caretakers and the caregivers. And so just the amount of strength and perseverance that Steve shows is kind of like well documented, but I think the movie is really a testament to Michelle's strength too.
And to both of their bravery to allow all of this stuff to be filmed and shown, because it started with Steve filming himself, and then it was Ty and David, these two young filmmakers that lived with them, became caretakers too, and also were shooting. And then, you know, as his story grew and grew, you know, we got involved after, you know, a couple years, and then we came in and shot some additional stuff. But it's really been a community effort to document this story, and it's all about their bravery to allow that story to be told in the raw reality of it.
Yeah, both Steve and Michelle, like, I think that they're both so charismatic, and they draw people to them, you know? Like, just getting in a room with those two, you can understand why there's so many good people around them, and they've built this community of people that help document this story.
Well, and every story needs good characters, right? And I think you guys hit the jackpot with your characters. That's great. And I'm curious, have you seen this film with a live audience yet?
Not more than like 20 people.
Well, you're going to get more than 20 people tomorrow. Yeah, so that'll be interesting for you.
Really excited about sharing it with the wider world.
We're premiering tomorrow, I believe, on
at the Mark at 11:30 a.m.
At the Mark at 11:30 a.m. on Saturday, and of course it's running throughout. And there's also Salt Lake screenings as well. So if you're in town and you don't want to come to Park City, there's a chance to see it as well. Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Clay.
Thanks
for being here. The film is Gleason. Make sure you check it out. More in the can after this.